why is the company so low on cash? We're bringing in revenue, but we don't have cash. Something wasn't working. So I said, let me follow the money. And long story short, I identified that there had been over 50 million, as I found it, fraud committed by the founder. I'm going to report this to the SEC, and they're smarter than me, and I'm sure it's going to all be okay. The next day I went in and met with the chairman and the number two, not stating that I was aware of fraud, but just simply saying, hey, I'm CEO. I need to manage our financials, make sure that everything is prepared for our upcoming audit at year end, and that we're prepared to report to our investors.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
So that was at, call it 4 p.m. that day. Have the meeting. I walk in my office the next day, and my number two was sitting in my office. Chairman wasn't there. My number two was there, and he simply stood up right when I arrived, and he said, "You're fired, and I'm walking you out."
Wow.
So that was the most tragic experience for me, because he had been my best friend through college.
That is sad.
And yes, it really did. So, and it wasn't even that I was fired. It was that, whoa, I'm here, like, clearly. And then it was just proven to me, like, okay, they know what's up here. Meaning, okay, now I do know it was fraud. Because
they didn't get wind that you blew the whistle.
And maybe they got wind, but I just knew, okay, so yesterday I said, you don't have control over bank accounts. Essentially, you can't commit fraud anymore. And then I walk in and now I'm fired. So, wow, good thing that I just reported to the SEC the day before. Good thing, right? And we don't have time on this podcast to go through all of the impact of that decision, but the fallout was, it completely ruined me, financially and professionally and emotionally. It had such substantial impact on me. But I do not regret it. It was a personal cost that I would absolutely take, because I didn't give up my ethics.
Did what was right. Well, you spent a lot of time investing in learning how to do it right, and both technically and morally. So, well, I'm sorry that happened, and then I would imagine that it's ongoing still, but the company's probably not in the greatest shape.
Well, so let's talk about that. It's been 7 years since that moment, which was actually 7 years and a few weeks ago that I was walked out of the office and had just whistleblown to the SEC, but no one knew that. So all that the public knew was I was just fired, and there's a successful company going, right? And I couldn't say anything otherwise. And now, where are we? Well, so 5 years after that moment, finally he was indicted. So that at least brought proof. And then this year,
was that both of them or just one of them?
Just the chairman, and then a handful of others who were the external investor, the fundraisers. So a group of individuals, and particularly the chairman who led this effort, were indicted. And
number two,
that took 5 years. The number two was not included.
Was he just asked to fire you, or was he?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
So the chairman needed to get rid of you and asked the person that brought you. That's sad.
Sad. Yeah. And so it took 5 years for the, research and just the case to be built. And I was working with the SEC, and it ended up being the US Postal Service General. What's the technical term
Something
there?
like that, yeah.
To
Postmaster General or something.
Thank you, Postmaster General. And so that was 5 years in, and the case is this summer. Right around my birthday. And, this brings me some level of, I don't know if it's comfort, but just a little bit of justice that the judge is named Judge Jill. So Judge Jill is 7 years later, bringing this case. So it's United States of America versus fraudster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes people see very, very rich people stealing from other very, very rich people and think it doesn't really matter. It's just numbers to them. They can't afford another yacht or another trip anyway. But it trickles down to the upper middle class, the middle class, and even those entry level workers and families and spouses and significant others and children, and it's a big deal. For sure.
Yeah, that's really well put. That before this experience, I thought it was just the inner circles of wealthy to wealthy, impact. But oh my gosh, and and it still impacts me to this day, and others were really impacted by it. So and so the company was moved into bankruptcy, and that was only about a year after the whistleblowing. And so the company is completely closed, and
Okay, well let me get you on a little happier note and have you tell us about Rocket Tail a bit.
Okay, so there I was, with that business, I shut it down, right? Yeah. I moved it, like I blew the whistle, and then effectively I'm moving it into bankruptcy. But then I was provided with, or given an opportunity to step into Rocket Tail, which was in the transportation semi-truck space. And it's aerodynamic solutions for the tail of, get it, Rocket Tail, for the tail of semi-trucks, so that they have improved fuel efficiency when driving. This was so fun because it was really an IP heavy business. And we produced the product in Mexico. And my role there was, I stepped in as COO and CFO. The founder was the CEO and a great engineer and innovator, excited about this product he had developed, but wasn't sure, hey, now what, right? Yeah. He's this engineer. Yeah. And with this one product, what do we do?
Yeah. Let me just ask for anyone who may not know this. So the intellectual property, I imagine, is a set of patents over how this is constructed, this physical thing. It's not software or something. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Again, these acronyms. So I stepped in. The investor asked me to step in and work with the CEO, this engineer who was brilliant. And for us to figure out, well, what's our strategy? We've got this great product. Now what? And we weren't sure, are we going to scale it by producing more of them, figuring out, who we sell them to, and how are we taking this global? That was one opportunity they'd been exploring. And essentially where we got to was recognizing, let's not reinvent the wheel. And what I mean by that is...
No pun intended.
I hadn't thought of that. Thanks. So we did. We said, what's our strength? Because we sat down and we'd whiteboard. And we did, if we've heard of the SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? When we did that whole analysis, we recognized, what the company's strength was? The genius of the engineer. Coming up with really smart engineered product. Our strength was not, we weren't like these large transportation companies that had infrastructure to be able to grow. And, meaning we didn't have a sales team to go, sell to these thousands of transportation and logistics companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We figured, we're smart enough, we could figure it out, but that's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. So we were humble and recognized, let's not reinvent the wheel. There are companies out there that already have it. Let's recognize our value and see if we can't sell this to a company that has a lot of wheels, a semi truck company.
Yeah.
And we've all probably seen semi trucks on the road called with brand Knight or Swift on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a publicly traded company.
Mm-hmm.
Large, one of the largest. We reached out to Knight Swift, one of their subsidiaries, and said, we have something we think might be quite interesting to you.
Yeah.
And, I could go through the details, but we don't need to.
Yeah.
We sold the company and gave them the opportunity to then make the most of what we had engineered.
Well, I'm driving a lesson for someone that's trying to make their career work out. And you just stated one. State another one, or state that one explicitly. Like, you went in and you learned that if you're going into a situation and you have an idea, what's next? What did you learn from this?
What I learned from Rocketail was leveraging your assets and not I think I'm repeating what I had just said, right? Yeah. Which what we learned was that engineer and founder has his value, and we said let's recognize that and not sit here and undervalue that. Yeah. Let's value that, right? Yeah. And I've used that lesson many a times later.
Yeah. You just happen to have a Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Michael Jordan, and so rather than try to go be great 3-point shooters, let's just build around them and make it vital.
Let's build around that. Exactly. And now that engineer and founder is on to his next company engineering another product because that's his LeBron.
That's his superpower. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the other thing that I'm hearing is I love it. I love how you slipped in a little bit the subsidiary of Swift. And I'm guessing that it's like back to, you've got to do business with people. You've got to get your work successful through people. And if you're someone that you feel like, I just don't know anyone, I have no chance with them, I guarantee you go out to a family, an extended family, your second grade girlfriend, your high school buddies, you're going to find someone that has a connection with something that connects with your idea. And you may not get to go all the way to the global CEO or chairman. You may have to go into the middle and find someone. And is that what happened?
Yeah, that's essentially what we did. Recognizing, sure, we could get to, and we actually did have contacts at the parent company, but we, in doing our research, recognized that where deals were being done, because we were smaller. Yeah. So we recognized that the larger parent company, they're publicly traded. They're not going to likely focus on a small, call it the word bolt-on acquisition. It's not going to be justified for them. Yeah. So it was more for us a focus on, let's go to who could care about us.
Who could care about, who you would be valuable to. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And we can use that as examples, not just in deal making, like I'm bringing examples of, but in searching for jobs, right? Who could care about what I have to offer?
Yeah. And even that exercise that we started out with, like finding the ideal prospect because of your ideal customer, so you thrive and make money and help. Yeah. And who are you most valuable to? That's the core of any great career, is who could I be very valuable and help most, really.
And can I add to
this? Yeah, love it.
Which is, then you're being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
because you're recognizing, who am I? What do I offer?
Yeah.
And then finding who that's most value, who's really going to value that. Rather than, sometimes I've recognized when I'm not doing that, I can go out and find people who have, who need things, and I could be like, well, I could be that. I could be what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not my authentic self.
Yeah.
Where I could be morphing and saying, well, for sure I could fill their needs.
Yeah.
Nope. Let me recognize who I authentically am and my biggest skill sets. Then I'm also better serving myself.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say, like, rather than a big leap to be something that you're not, it is also, there is one other option, which is the little jump forward, or the little in a direction you should become, in quickly and with little effort, well, not little effort, but comparatively less effort than reinventing yourself. So that's also being true to yourself, is growing into something that someone would find extremely valuable, for sure.
Which is what I've been focused on, moving into a new sector, which I think we'll talk about.
Yeah, okay. Let's keep going then. You have lots of interesting stories at these stops. So let's go back to Blue Stripe. You got it humming. It was going better. Tell us about this portion of business. This is another flavor of being an employee and a leader. Yeah.
Yes. So I was recognizing at this time, with Rocket Tail, gosh, I really like stepping in when there's opportunity or change needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, literally the day that I sell Rocket Tail, I remember the cafe I'm sitting at, waiting for the wire to come in so I can inform the board closed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get a call from the primary shareholder of Blue Stripe, again saying, Jill, what are you up to? And I said, well, actually, I'm closing on a deal today and I'm not sure what I'm doing next. Got anything for me? And he said, yep, that's why I'm calling. And this is in the time of COVID.
Oh, dear.
Okay. So
very fun time.
We all remember that. And so he said, I asked, well, fill me in on, because I'm recognizing, the company's based in Europe. Likely study abroad student housing might have been impacted because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Students from the US studying in Italy, France, and Spain had definitely been impacted.
For sure.
He tells me all of the students from our thousands of units had been sent home.
Mm.
We had empty apartments across Europe. And based on the regulations in Europe, Blue Stripe needed to keep paying rent. Mm. And we had zero income. And the company had received funding just before COVID. Mm. And all of that funding, literally like a week before COVID. And unfortunately for those investors and the company, all funding had been dried up and used to pay operating expenses, trying to survive, and none of us knew how long COVID would last, right? Mm. And the implications. So at this point, I get a call and he says, now we're in survival mode. Can you step in and help us survive? And we just don't know where this is going to go. Mm. And they were losing team members and I needed to step in, which I did.
Yeah.
So I stepped in, and we just didn't know where it would go, but where it went is that I led the wind down, the closure of our various companies, because we had a number of, in each country, we needed different subsidiary companies, mm-hmm. right? So Blue Stripe had companies in Ireland, 2 in France, 1 in Italy, and 1 in Spain. Mm. So if you can imagine, we had a lot of management to do there. We had hundreds of vendors. We had a lot of challenges there. And so I spent about a year and a half managing bankruptcies, wind downs, dissolutions, all of these technical terms of handling chaos.
Mm. Winding down, disappearing chaos. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That happens too. That happens too in work life, and also been on both sides of that. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
so let's before we go happy and I just want to tell people we're going to do two fun things to end. We're going to talk about what you're doing with children these days, and then we're going to also talk about your advice for someone trying to make a career successful. But you're currently the president of Liberty Equity, and just give us a really short elevator pitch about what that's all about, because that's your current role, and always looking, I'm sure, but that sounds like, but that's your current role.
Yeah, so in closing down Blue Stripe across Europe and exiting the transportation company, I recognize that I have a unique set of skills, as some people say, which is that I can, and I like helping companies work on their strategy and exit. Whether that's needing to wind down or wanting to sell or whatever that might be. Really, I like doing that. So Liberty Equity is a divestment firm. That's the technical term. And I work on diplomatically winding down and selling companies.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn to your philanthropic life.
Yes.
Interestingly, I've not only interviewed Kent, but who's your accounting friend, the master of all accountants, actually, and moving on to his own philanthropic post-retirement. It's kind of a quote-unquote retirement life.
Can we call it that?
It's not really retired, actually. But anyway, he's moved to very charitable things. And he also introduced me to the Baroness Nicholson.
Okay.
And so she's on a previous episode, and she's a European leader, done amazing things, been involved with the same type of organization, as a connection to it anyway. So tell us what you're doing there, and tell us I didn't go into a ton of depth on what it is and really what happens for the people it helps. Tell us about this new gig.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, referring back to what you mentioned so well, which is in our careers, we can take, we can make small changes. Yeah. And that's what I did here, where I've been a leader in for-profit companies, and referring back to that experience I had as an 8-year-old where the food bank wouldn't take the canned food. And I recognized, I guess I need to make some, social impact change myself and find the right place for this, where this food needs to go. I still have that drive, and I've been on nonprofit boards for the last 20 years. And when I went through that whistleblowing trauma, that's where it really, came back in full force. And I felt like now is the time. Let me really kind of take this incremental shift in my career to where I've been a for-profit operational leader. I think I want to move into the nonprofit leadership space. And so I moved back to Washington, D.C., and I did a graduate program wanting to get the academic, experience in nonprofit leadership. Got a graduate degree in that, and then moved from board member into an executive director role of US Friends of AMAR, which is focused on, our mission is really to mobilize support for refugees and internally displaced persons and overall vulnerable communities so that they can rebuild lives. And our regional focus is, we're global, but primarily we're focused on the US, Middle East, and Eastern Europe.
And I wasn't aware of the US and Eastern Europe. So what are you doing for children in the Middle East and Eastern Europe?
Yeah, so we have programs really focused on education, and I can go into specifics, but focused on education, medical services, and self-reliance, job creation.
And how do you do that in the U.S.? I guess we have an abstraction of Europe, Eastern Europe, and Middle East, that there's war. Obviously, there's war. It seems like all the time, and children suffer constantly. And the Baroness talked about how this was named after her somewhat adopted child, but in the U.S., like right here, what do you do here? We're not always at war.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So here in the US, we have such a an important and diverse community of refugees.
Mm.
And that's a community that we focus on serving here
Mm.
in the US.
Mm.
So we support internationally, we support refugees and displaced persons, and then that same community that is so important globally, we have right here in our community,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And so in we have programs here in Utah. I'll give some examples. We have an eye clinic for
Oh,
refugees,
yeah.
and we have monthly support there, and then we have education in the form of English classes for Ukrainian refugees and a number of other programs where we're just working on not only helping with education and medical like we do internationally, but also access and community building,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that they are able to really integrate and have this feel like their new home.
Mm. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations. And yeah.
It's really I'm honored to be able to be a part of our community being able to have an impact
Mm-hmm.
and create value, because it's really so similar to for-profit work, and this is also very profitable for those that we're able to serve and those who volunteer and the donors that contribute. So it's really amazing. And can I give some examples of what we
Please.
do overseas?
Please.
So we're focused in the Middle East, primarily in northern Iraq,
Mm.
in a region called Kurdistan, and we have we support. You mentioned the Baroness. We do financially support programs that her charity runs, and then we also operate programs. So we support their financially. We support their medical clinics, and then we run programs. I'll give an example. I just traveled over there a few months ago. We put new roofs on, installed new roofs on hundreds of homes. We provide winter clothes. We provided that to about 600 children. Right now, we're working on a program that's currently being implemented to with a small village that the children have to walk, that when they're walking to school, need to walk on a highway. It's very unsafe to and from school. And last year, a young child was unfortunately killed
Mm.
walking to school. And this is solvable, right? And so we're bringing a solution in collaboration with LDS Charities to install a sidewalk and hand railing, and also implement pedestrian training with the children. And then once we get that in place, we're going to take these learnings and the monitoring and evaluation of it to implement pedestrian training to other schools so that it's scalable solutions. So we really just do needs assessments and identify where we can have helpful impact in an efficient way.
Mm. It's wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
cars go fast these days, and in many other different walks of life, things change a lot, and education is really important, and other of the tangibles that you bring. Well, that's great. I am really in awe of all that organization does, Friends of AMAR, and
It's amazing.
yeah, it is
It's great to
amazing.
be a part of it.
I was so excited to hear what you have. You've said a lot of it, but to boil down, if you were in a 10 minutes with the few minutes we have left, if you were in a short conversation like that to someone just starting out, I asked you to bring your assignment, which was to give us some hardcore practical advice. I'm going to let you end the show and do that now.
Okay. And I'm going to look down at paper because
you've been thinking. I know you've been thinking about it, so that's fine.
Yeah, and I hope this is meaningful if anybody's listening to this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with, don't scale what's toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And because for many reasons, and your environment really shapes your outcome. I gave a number of examples of environments that were toxic, and it was really, I felt it physically, emotionally, intellectually, right? The toxicity can be, so negatively impactful. So don't scale that, right? recognize it and be aware.
So let me ask you
don't feel
so quickly. Scale typically means to grow in business,
Yep.
and what you're saying is don't spread it. Is that true?
Don't spread it. Let's say if don't contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a manager or a coworker, or this can also be on a personal basis or a friend. When you recognize it, you can be, I'll just say, like a catalytic converter that takes toxicity and actually transfers that into something beneficial. Right? You move it into something better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And don't just sit in that toxicity, because then it'll still be there.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes you need to leave. That unfortunate situation with no event venue, I needed to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And sometimes you can make change, because I hope you've heard in my examples that there were situations where I was able to make positive change. And with Rocket Tail, the engineer and founder was really frustrated, and that could have been toxic for him, feeling unsuccessful. But we were able to take that, and he was the catalytic converter in being, okay, let's take what we're feeling as negative and figure out how we move this forward.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Beautiful example.
Okay.
Okay. Next.
Well, my next one. All right. On the point of that whistleblowing experience, integrity is expensive but worth it. Always stick with it. Okay?
It's cheap long
Do the
term,
hard
isn't
thing.
it?
Oh,
Yeah.
what long term?
It's very inexpensive long term. Very good investment. Yeah.
And yes, and you know what? It can even be expensive long term.
Yeah.
It was for me, financially expensive, even long term. But it is worth it, because you might lose a deal. You might you might lose friends. It might cost you in various ways, but you will be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
however it might be expensive, do not lose your integrity.
Yeah.
In business and in life. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, all right, that was my next one. Are we ready for the
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Rebuild when you need to rebuild. Rebuild with aligned ecosystems.
Meaning?
What I mean by that is, you might feel a little frantic when things, we've all probably like broken up with someone. Okay. I'm talking like on a personal level. And you might all of a sudden be like, oh, well, I'm just going to find my next person. Take a minute. And so that's my comparison, right? Think about that same approach. Don't just go to the next person, right? Really. And so I'm going to repeat what I said. Rebuild with aligned ecosystems. What's aligned with, choose environments that support your ethics, your goals, your, vision for the future. Because those aligned ecosystems are going to be there to support you, right? And strengthen you. And I would bring us back to the example of, Manduka was an aligned ecosystem for me, right? Like it was positive, but then what wasn't was no event venue, not aligned, right? And it was not aligned with my values, and I really needed to take time to get to what is aligned for me, where I was like, I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to get into the aligned ecosystem of charitable work for impact, because those are going to be my people.
Those are going to be
right?
your people. Yep.
Okay. And that's what it is for me. So, and then do we have time for one more?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to say my final is live in your legacy, not for it.
I love that.
How I would describe that is build your table. And sometimes you even need to build the room, because you might not get invited into a room, let alone invited to, sit at a table. And you might think, why can't I sit at that table with those people? Build the table and invite others now to sit at the table and have great experiences, because the experiences at that table with great people who are aligned with you, that is your legacy. And it's not the seats you hold at a various table, meaning a role in a company, right? Yeah, I was CEO at a $250 million company. That is not a role that right? That was not positive for me. That was the worst experience of my life, was being a CEO of a $250 million company. It ruined me, right?
Yeah.
What's my legacy? Because I'll repeat, live in your legacy, not for it in some distant future. It's right now.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the challenges that have come, because it's really taught me that to live now.
Yeah.
And live with people having valuable experiences personally and professionally. And I would suggest that we all do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that last one's beautiful. And I spent 10 years in my young career at Covey. So I get the legacy thing to some degree. But I love your change, because it adds and updates a little bit, in that, legacy by definition traditionally would be for the people that are after you're dead. And to talk about the present like you do, and the focus on human beings in your ecosystem to connect those two. It's what it's all about. The people that I admire most who've passed on in life are not the ones that left a cabin or left a bunch of money. It's that they left a relationship with me and the ideas in my head that shaped my life. And that's because they were present in their legacy, like you're saying. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, Jill Dempsey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.